Good evening, everyone. My name is Todd Reinhardt, and I'm the Vice President of Sandoval HOA. Thanks for coming this evening. I will be opening the town hall meeting tonight. David Ott, John Elkins, and Chuck Keel are attending a meeting with our new proposed bulk landscaping provider, Juniper, so that's why they're not here initially. They may show up in a little bit. By now you've received and reviewed hopefully the proposed budget for the HOA in 2024. Thanks to Bill Simonelli taking the charge with the Finance Committee. I think you would agree this is probably one of the more outstanding budgets that we've seen put together, at least since I've been here. So kudos to Bill and that crew. Bill, do you want to recognize very quickly your
Yes.
Finance Committee folks that are here?
So sitting with me is Rob Herron and Lynn Smith of the Finance Committee. Also on the Finance Committee is Tom Robertson, Judy Nassif, and Sean Kinney, who are not here tonight.
Perfect. After I get done with the announcements, we will say the pledge. I apologize, that should have been on the top. Our agenda for this evening is Bill and the Finance Committee will make the presentation on the proposed 2024 budget. After the presentation, Bill will take questions from the audience. Please limit your questions to no more than 3 minutes. We will be using a timekeeper this evening. If you would, please come to the podium to ask your questions so the folks that are on YouTube can listen to your particular question and hear the answers. We would ask for your assistance during the presentation not to interrupt or ask questions during the presentation. And we are committed to answering all of your questions. I know that Bill is committed to do that. So any question that you have, given the committee, we'll be glad to answer those. And one final note, no other topics or issues will be discussed at this meeting other than the proposed budget. Okay? With that, I'll turn. Why don't we do the pledge first? I'm sorry, I didn't do that. If you would stand for the pledge, please. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you everybody for coming and watching on the video replay tonight. This has been an interesting year for Sandoval. A lot of our efforts over the past year have been focusing on the recovery from Hurricane Ian. As a community, we know that we had our assessment and things with the assessment are moving along, and we hope to sometime early next year conclude all the activities associated with the recovery from Ian. Tonight, what we're going to do is we're going to go through what I call a top-line overview of the budget, proposed budget, and we'll then the way our budget is constructed, we're going to sort of extract the subset of what I call the operating budget, and that subset is what is the community assessment is based on. Then we'll have a few minutes to talk about the neighborhood landscape budget for the 613 owners that manage landscape services. Then we'll do sort of a dive into the reserve study and the funding proposals, and that is taking more of a longer term view, looking out 10 to 13 years in terms of our financing needs and how much money we should set aside for our reserve projects and any potential emergencies. And then we'll finish with the community question and answer period. At top level, the operating budget is seeing an overall net increase of 4% in expenses. The largest percentage increases are coming, and dollar value increases are coming from insurance premiums, payroll and benefits, and common area landscaping, and we'll go through each of those in a little bit more detail in a few minutes. Sort of like the punchline is, with all the puts and takes, with the increases in revenue we're seeing from activities, collections, and things like that, we're able to put together a budget proposal that is recommending no change in the community assessment for next year. Neighborhood landscape expenses. The budget for neighborhood landscape expenses is based on that we will be transitioning to a new vendor in 2024. Transition details are still being worked out as they finalize contract negotiations. The board and the landscape committee will share more of those details once things are finalized there. One key change going into next year is that we are decoupling tree trimming and mulch services from the landscape vendor and directly contracting with third-party vendors to do that. And we'll talk about that and what costs we have associated with that. And the good news there is, with the contract negotiations under place right now, we are forecasting that the neighborhood landscape assessment will be reduced 9% for those owners that get that service. The reserve budget. This is where there's going to be a lot of discussion. I personally believe the objective is to accumulate sufficient funds to cover our spend without going back to the community and asking for large assessments. We don't want to go to the community 5 years from now and say, hey, we don't have enough money to surface the road, so either let's live with potholes or everybody fork over $2,000. So that's the kind of thing we want to avoid by putting a plan in place that builds up the reserves to adequately fund all our needs. There's a near-term view of reduced sales activity, which primarily funds the reserve budget, so that presents some challenges in terms of how we fund the reserves so that we have sufficient money in place to meet our needs. And the punchline there is that the proposal that we have put forward is that we will increase the reserve assessment from $78 to $156 an owner, which is essentially a $78 increase. Switching gears, the operating expense budget. That is, as I mentioned, that's a subset of the total budget, and that is totally funded by the community assessment. The neighborhood landscape budget is a self-contained budget that is totally funded by the 613 owners that receive managed landscape services. And the reserve budget is funded by the reserve assessment to all owners of the Sandoval community. At a top level, this is when you sort of collapse the details and look at the main headings for each of the budget lines. We are looking at a total budget of income of a little bit over $5 million for the community, with total expenses equaling the $5,027,523. So it's basically, we're a nonprofit organization, so the goal is all the money coming in, we spend or we put into reserves. We don't make a profit. And you can see that there's various ups and downs with the various expense lines and the income lines. Some of the good news is that user fee income, we're seeing a good increase that is from the work being done by the social lifestyle committees with all the activities that are going on and generating income from the events that are going on there. I think we also saw Halloween was a big success a couple days ago. Things like that flow money into the community. Rental income, this facility we're starting to see a real uptick in income from renting this out for weddings, graduation parties, bridal showers, things of that nature. So it's good to see that the residents of the community are taking advantage of this facility. The collections income. This is collecting fines for, dirty roofs and other architectural violations. We've seen a concerted effort by the management team to try to do as much collections as possible. Also included in collections is when someone strikes the gate and we charge them for repairing the gate, it falls into collections income. Other income that is from other sources, And investment income, that's the investment income we get from the interest income from our investment account on the reserves. We still have to list that on our statement as income. When you break down the subset, here are all the operating expense categories, and what I've done is I've ordered them by the category that saw the largest dollar value increase from last year, or from this year to next year, and going in descending order. No problem. Okay. So as we talked about insurance, payroll, benefits, and landscaping, as the dollar value have the highest increases from this year to next year. Contracted services sees a modest rise. So we'll talk about the relationship between contracted services and repair and maintenance at the lower end of the list. Pretty much, we've been tracking our expenses. The ones that are primarily lower than this year are based on actual experience from the last year, year and a half in terms of what the real expenses have been in those categories. Okay, let's talk about insurance. I can't wait to get my insurance bill for next year. Our premiums come up in January when our house anniversary comes out. We've all seen that the Florida market has created some distortions with property insurance and liability insurance. We are having to deal with that. One of the things that we saw last year was that we got a projected set of insurance rates in the October-November timeframe, and the actual rates when the premiums came due in the March-April timeframe were 20-30% higher. So even in that short period of time, we saw a significant change, and our insurance agent is forecasting a significant rise going into next year. Additionally, because of what happened this year, where we saw an increase in the actual premiums from what was quoted by insurance agent in the fall to when we basically get 30 days notice to renew the policies and have to make a payment. I put in a contingency line to cover an increase between the quoted value and what may actually occur. Now, if we don't use up all that contingency, that'll be credited back into the assessment calculations for next year. Payroll and benefits. What's driving that increase is that we sat down with the associate management team and we did a very accurate counting of head count, especially the hours associated with full attendance. Last year when we sat down, Chuck was new, I was new, the information that had passed from the previous administrations was not very detailed. So some of the numbers that we used for calculating the payroll last year were not accurate. Additionally, what we're seeing is that we're in a tight labor market, so we are putting in a modest cost of living increase into the employee's salary next year, because we believe it's important in a competitive labor market to retain the employees that we have here today. And in addition to that, their benefits are going up, just like we're seeing health care benefits going up. We have to pay that for the employees also. The last item that is adding to the cost is that we're going to be making an effort to complete the digitization of the association records and catalog all the information, and we will be moving it into a secure storage and offline data storage facilities. And we're looking at bringing in a part-time admin to assist with that effort for about 16 weeks on a part-time, with about 20-30 hours of basis to facilitate that project. Common area landscaping. So what's happened over the course of the year is that the number of items that have to be added to the landscaping task for the common area, that's all the area that we see around here, Hayden Lane, all the walkway areas and things like that have been increased. One of the things that we did is the management team with the landscape committee went out to get an accurate head count of all the trees that require yearly maintenance, so that it's now bundled into the assessments why we had to go through and do the tree trimmings. A few weeks ago, all the coconuts got cut from the pool area, and we're just trying to make sure that we have a good handle on all the trees and all the areas that need to be done. In addition to that, fertilization of the trees and shrubs was not included in the budget last year and had not been done for a few years, and that needs to be done in order to promote healthy landscape within the community. So we're trying to make sure that it's part of the budget going forward. Also, as been mentioned at the board meetings, the landscape committee is put together a RFP, or request for proposal, to go out to vendors for doing the common landscape work, because we'll be changing vendors in 2024. The numbers that we have from the responses to these are what we've built into this budget estimate for next year. Contracted services and repair and maintenance. If you go back and look at those two categories, you see contracted services has gone up, repair and maintenance has gone down. One of the things that we did is, as part of the budget process, is we spent considerable time recategorizing the expenses. This is a legacy issue that from the transition from the previous management company to when associate took over, some of the expenses were miscategorized. A good example was the Invera services contract, which is a yearly contract for them to manage the gate access, was being put under repair and maintenance, which is not a repair and maintenance function. It's a contracted service. So that's why you see one looks like it was out of kilter and one is saving a lot of money. Most of that is due to just revamp or reorganizing what goes in which category. And if you look at the details on the worksheet, you'll see which categories, which GLs have been moved where, and which ones are being discontinued as we try to consolidate and streamline the budget worksheet. The other thing that is driving some increase in costs is earlier this year we agreed to bring on a new security company at a slightly higher rate. I think generally we've been pretty pleased with their service to the community, so we're continuing their contract rates into next year. Utilities. I'd like to give Rob sort of a pat on the back for what he did. He went through all the utility invoices we had for this year and really did a drill down on the rates, because last year, if everybody remembers, last year we were seeing our electric rates, especially in the summer, going through the roof. Rob did a very good forensics job to look at how the rates had stabilized this year. So that's why we felt comfortable primarily reducing the utilities budget, because we felt that the LCEC rates have gotten better over the past year. Other expenses, the main thing that we reduced is that because of the experience we have this year, we've reduced the amount of the overall budget contingency, because we felt that we did a much better job of getting everything understood, and there would be less need for a contingency going into the budget next year. Shifting gears to the neighborhood landscaping budget proposal. What you'll see now is that for the owners that have managed landscape services, your budget is going to be broken down into 5 categories for next year. So the first one is the base landscape service. That's the mowing, the edging, the trimming type services. That is based on a fixed contract rate that is being finalized through the contract negotiations right now. The irrigation maintenance, also which would be done by Jennifer Landscaping, is a usage-based number. That is, 10 houses require irrigation repair 1 month, 20 houses require repair next month. So you see those numbers go up and down. So we worked off of numbers for the past 2 years to come up with what we think are a pretty good estimate of what the cost would be for that. So when you submit, so this is sort of what we believe the total cost of all the irrigation repair work orders would be next year. As I mentioned, we'll be shifting to third-party contractors for tree trimming and mulch service. We believe that will provide a higher quality of service, number one. Number two, that'll give us the ability to contract directly with these service providers and be able to competitively bid those services from year to year. So if we don't like tree trimming, the company that did tree trimming next year, we can shift to a different company the following year, but it gives us a lot of flexibility with that. And finally, any transition of this magnitude, there are some unknowns in terms of one-time costs, some special work that may be done to clean up previous work from the vendor, or you may have to pay the vendor a few more months into 2024 as they terminate their contract at their normal termination date. So I built into this landscape budget proposal what I call a vendor transition contingency of $40,000 to cover all those unknowns. If any, as I mentioned in the letter, any of that contingency which is not spent will be credited back to the 25 budget. So if we don't spend any of that $40,000, then we'll see our bills next year be reduced by that $40,000. So how do we come up with our community assessment? So when we look at all the expenses, we're looking at $3.6 million of expenses in the operating budget. We have $80,500 forecasted of offsetting revenue from rentals, collections, event activities, things of that nature. If you've been tracking our monthly financial reports, you'll see that we are carrying a budget surplus in 2023. So we're applying $100,000 of that budget surplus into 2024. And that's how we're coming up with the operating assessment of having to fund $3.4 million, which comes to $23.80 per owner. So how does that look? So on a yearly basis, we're looking at a 0 increase for the community assessment, and we're looking at a 9% decrease. And you're actually going to see a bit of a cash flow decrease also, because if you remember, we had, because of the delays associated with Hurricane Ian last year, the budget was not approved until January. So the increases for 23 didn't go into effect until Q2. So the increases, instead of being spread over 4 quarters, were spread over 3 quarters. So you'll see even a slight reduction in what you're paying, even though the assessments aren't changing very much. Okay, reserve budget. So we've tried to put together a reserve budget that is based on 3 key priorities. The first priority is to cover unexpected repairs that have to be done. These, to quote Donald Rumsfeld, are the unknown unknowns. Okay? We ran into one this year. The pickleball court lights had to be replaced once, and so that was $42,000 that wasn't in the budget this year that we had to do. Otherwise, if we didn't repair it, we had to keep the courts closed or eventually see the lights fall on one of the players. So the idea there is you set aside some money, just like every household does, set aside some money for true emergencies. The maintenance and replacement of common amenities and physical structures is keeping the pool up, keeping the playground activities up, maintaining the tennis courts, pickleball courts, keeping the roads in shape. All those activities are funded through the reserve study. Last year we had a reserve study done that was completed in October. We'll be doing another one next year. And this projects out 20 years in terms of all the work that needs to be done for the community. And then every time you do a new study, it sort of resets the analysis. The current version of this is available on Sandoval for all residents. And a lot of the analysis for the reserve spend is based on the information that's contained here. The last item is what I call discretionary items. These are, Jack wants new speakers, or we want to or we decide that we want to add something to the rec center or something like that, or if we want to go get some additional exercise equipment that the community believes would be useful. Those are, every committee has got some ideas about what they want to spend. Eventually those ideas have to be filtered through the management team for competitive quotes, have to go to the finance committee, and then ultimately it's up to the board. So we're trying to set sort of a bucket of how much we would spend in that area. One thing I failed to mention is that inside of the reserve study-based expenditures, we're also including a line item for a 4-year project to replace the landscape that was destroyed by Hurricane Ian. That was not included with the Hurricane Ian assessment because that is considered to be, from an association management perspective, a discretionary spend and not related to the recovery from the hurricane itself. So that's why we had to treat it the way we're treating it here. So we're looking at a 4-year plan to replace the landscape. That plan will be shared with the community once it's finalized. Right now, we have sort of like a high-level quote to work with, but as we get the plan going, we'll go out and get competitive quotes for those. So we expect that the actual cost will be less than $100 grand a year as we've got built into the budget right now. So breaking it down to categories, the unknown unknowns category is $50,000. We're allocating $483,000 for reserve study-based expenditures, and we'll go through the details of that in a few minutes. And the discretionary reserve expenditures are $50,000. So if you go through that, there's quite a list of work that needs to be done. I think the theme for this list is, when you look at the details, is that we're replacing key parts of the infrastructure. We're starting a phase replacement of the furniture, the pool area furniture. We're starting a phase replacement of the older mechanical and electronic components of the gates. We're starting up, we have, as has been discussed in previous board meetings, we have identified we have erosion issues on a number of lakes that need to be addressed. And we're starting sort of a year-to-year plan to start addressing erosion of the lakes, because it's a key component of the health of the community. Also, we started this year with planting with corals into the lakes. That does help in terms of keeping erosion down, keeping the health of the lakes in place, and basically promoting the environmental aspects of the community. Traffic mitigation. That's a line item that has been updated from the reserve study. Instead of updating some of the security cameras and things like that, which we think are still in good working order, we're repurposing that line item to work with the Safety and Security Committee to come up with some traffic mitigation plans to try to keep the traffic under better control in the community, sort of manage the speed, maybe coming up with some ideas for being able to find the offenders that are speeding too fast down the roads and not honoring the stop signs. So they will be working on a set of proposals that will have to be reviewed, vetted by the management company, reviewed by the finance committee, and ultimately presented and reviewed and approved by the board before any of that money is spent. So one item here that is sort of sticking out is $140,000 for the water slide. According to the reserve plan, that is scheduled to be replaced next year. We currently are having an inspection done on that. I don't know if you remember, we had some repair work done on the slide within the last year or so. Once we get that inspection completed and in writing, and if there's any repair estimates, we think that number is going to come down, but until that formal inspection is completed and we have those results in writing, we have to sort of look at worst case and say, and put in that number for a replacement until we have better information. And also, we'll be doing a reserve study next year, so there's $8,000 to update the reserve study. Okay, so A lot of information on these next charts, so we'll sort of try to walk through these. The top line, the top box shows what the projected spend would be from now out 13 years for each of those categories. So if you go into the reserve study, one of the items in the reserve study is a 20-year plan of all the spend. So that's how we sort of project out what the spend's going to be based on an assumption on average inflation assumption of 3.5%. So that's what that reserve study baseline is. You see the line for post-Ian hurricane landscape renewal, that's 4 years at $100,000. Discretionary expenditures flat at $50,000. Likewise, emergency is flat at $50,000 each year. The years that are color-coded in sort of the pink, those are the years that are targeted in the reserve study where we have to start repaving the roads. Obviously, we would start with the older roads in phase 1 and phase 2, but the plan includes moving eventually to the phase 3 roads. So that is, so you can see that's where the biggest chunk of expenses is coming in those time frames. If we do nothing, basically if we leave the assessments as they are now and taking a very conservative view of house sales, so we all know that house sales are significantly down across the country. We originally forecasted 89 sales to come in this community this year. We're hopefully going to make somewhere between 53 and 55 this year. So we expect that, so 55 is about what we're expecting for next year. So as you can see, we're trying to take a very conservative view of what the recovery of house sales will be. Obviously, if it gets better, it's good for us. That means it's less we'll have to assess to the community down the road. But I think it's better to take sort of like a very conservative view of house sales for the next few years. So if you look at that and look at what the spend would be based on the money we have today and what we have to spend over the next 13 years, we will run out of money in 12 years. So that's obviously not a sustainable plan, because that means we really can't get our roads done, and we're not prepared as a community to handle an emergency like we had last year. We spent, before the assessment was charged, we spent close to $1.8 million because we had that in the bank. If we didn't have that in the bank, we would have been coming to the community in January asking for a $2,000 check from everybody. So that's why we think it's important to have a cushion to cover any kind of major emergencies that we get down the road. Now, the proposal that is built into the budget that has been sent out to the community basically says we would increase the reserve assessment on each owner from $78 to $156, and we would increase the new house sale assessment from $4,000 to $4,300. With the same set of assumptions, we will end in 13 years with about $2 million in the bank. So that obviously puts us in a much better position to handle any kind of emergencies down the road. So then if the question comes up, well, what with the same set of assumptions, what if you only just raised the assessment? There you end up with about $1.6 million left. So you don't have as much cushion to handle any kind of an emergency down the road. So the reserve analysis, why the proposal was made. One of the challenges that we have is because we use new homeowners as a primary source of funding for reserves, we have to strike a balance between what we can charge a new homeowner versus what we impose on existing homeowners. So that sometimes is, last year was the first time that we started charging homeowners reserve assessment. And I think like most HOA communities, it's important to have some kind of an assessment flowing from the existing owners for the upkeep of the community. With the conservative house sale view that we have in place today, if we go with the proposal, if the board approves the proposal that has been presented, then we'll end up with about $500,000 more in reserves than if we just increase the assessment on the existing owners. If house sales rebound sooner, the fastest way to build this will having an increase in the new owner sale, the new owner fee, will help us build up the reserves faster and will minimize any other future increases we have to do on existing owners down the road. So when you roll it all up, this is what we'll be asking the board to review and vote on November 16th. A proposal that is basically no change in the community assessment, $78 a year increase in the reserve assessment for the homeowners under managed network landscaping. They will be seeing $157.22 reduction in their assessments. And then there's a quarterly view of what we'll be asking the community to pay starting in Q1 of next year. There's copies of all this on the table if you don't have it, if you haven't picked it up yet. What are the next steps? So an email went out to the community. We are required to send out a written copy of the budget proposal to all owners. It has been mailed to all owners at their registered mail address. You should be seeing that coming in the mail in the next couple of days. Today is the community town hall to go over the review with the community. And between now and the 16th is the time for the community to ask questions, send, you can either call me, send email questions, discuss this with other board members, express your views, so that when the board meets on November 16th, we'll take the feedback, there might be some modifications to the proposal, and then the board will make a final vote on this on the 16th, and then we can all go off and have turkey for Thanksgiving. And now, we'll leave it up to the questions.
So if you do have questions, please step up to the, don't have phobia over the podium or the microphone, but if you would come up to the podium and microphone, just introduce yourself, what street you live on. That way our YouTube audience can hear the question, and Bill and the Finance Committee will be glad to answer that. We know who the first person is.
Can I-
Jamie?
And I will be timing the 3 minutes as Todd's asked me to do. And we'll give you a 30-second warning if I raise the sheet, not purposely, right?
Okay. I'm Jamie Pride. I live on Belleville Ford. And the questions that I have are relative to the reserve budget, because those are supposed to be relative to capital expenditures. And so I noticed that we have a lot of unplanned and or discretionary reserve expenses of $100,000 per year. So in your estimation, what kind of unplanned expenditures that are not part of the 5-year plan today in the budget do you consider where that money is to go towards?
Okay, so that's a good question. So going back, okay, so I get to those slides, okay. So the first one, the first 50,000 is set aside to be spent only for true emergencies, like we encountered this year with the pickleball lights, that they had to be repaired or we had to keep the courts closed.
Okay, question. If it's a repair, why was it not coming out of the operating budget?
Because the reserves are used for any repairs associated with the infrastructure. So that's why light replacement, anything that we replace, anything that's physical in the community that is not under, let's say, a yearly maintenance contract, we would have to pay for reserves. So a good example is we have a new contract to to service on the air conditioning units for the community clubhouses. It's an operating expense. If one of the compressors fails and we have to replace it, that would come out of reserves.
And so the reserve amount that you would expect for equipment, failure, anything along those lines are not already included in the reserve budget?
So what the reserve study tries to do is it looks at the life expectancy of each of the physical assets, like the AC units, the pumps on the pole, all the things. And the reserve study says this has a life of 17 years. You should plan on replacing it between years 15 and 16. So that's how we sort of try to plan and replace things before they fail. That's why the plan is built out for so many years like that.
Okay.
To answer your
Just
question?
just so the board knows that 3 minutes was primarily for Bill's explanation.
And there's 30 seconds. We have 30 seconds left. We have another motion
The only
needed.
other question is contracted services. I would hope that the board would put that on the Live Sandoval website for all resident homeowners to use so they can determine where their contracted expenses are going towards.
Okay, fair enough.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Next.
Don't start timing, Andrew.
Start down the measure.
You got 3
Okay, thank
seconds.
you. My name is Donna Dunford, I live on Land Bank. First, before you start timing,
Use the mic.
I would like to thank all of these people who worked so hard on this budget, because I can't imagine how many man-hours you all put in. So thank you all very much. Now-
It's all Bill that's doing it.
That's it.
I have 2 questions, so I'll try and do real quick. One is, do we have a contingency fund that is adequate to cover our deductible for our insurance?
If we keep funding the reserves at the rate that we're recommending, the answer to that is yes.
Okay. My second question is, thank you. My second question is, the proposed $4,300 initial contribution for new homeowners. Has anybody done a study or a survey to see how much other HOAs are charging for their initial finance?
I have not done that study. I have talked to several real estate agents to get their opinions as to whether or not that fee would be considered a detriment, and I haven't gotten, I've gotten one response saying yes and 2 responses saying no. So we've got different opinions on what kind of impact we'll see with that 4,300.
Do we know what other communities are charging?
I do not know that personally.
I believe we have heard that it's pretty unusual, that it's not a...
Many other communities have CDs that go in the $4,000 to $5,000 range, which is equivalent to kind of what happens when you buy in. We don't have CDs. We don't have the CDs. We use this system. To date, until this year, all of our reserve budget has been contributed by the homestead or homestead.
Right, but if we're going to keep raising it, between that and the interest rates to buy a home, it's not going to help our home sales. So it's just something I'd like you all to consider, that 300 difference could be a negative. And that was it. Thank you. Did I go over, Andrew?
Hello.
That's twice I've been today.
And I will take into consideration if Bill has to pull something up. Your questions being
Any other
asked.
questions? Don't be shy. This is your opportunity. No questions? All right. Well, we'll go ahead then, Bill and the Finance Committee. Thank you so very much for your hard work. With that, we'll go ahead and adjourn this town hall meeting. Thank you for attending.